I remember the sky first. It wasn't a color you could name. It was a fever of violet and gold, as if the sun bled its last into the clouds. The transport shuddered as it pierced the lower atmosphere, vox static, drowning out the pilot's hymn. I was a missionary of the Imperial creed, sent to Virelia to rekindle the Emperor's flame among his people. But even then, as the planet grew larger in the viewport, I could feel it, a vibration under the skin, like the heartbeat of something vast and awake beneath the crust. Virelia was supposed to be beautiful. Its archives spoke of marble cathedrals, of manufactorums that sang with praise as they forged for the Imperium. What I saw instead was a world glazed with ash and color, both streets gleaming with the residue of something iridescent, as if oil and blood had become the same thing. The cities stretched like carcasses of art, magnificent but wrong. Statues of saints had been remade, faces smooth, mouths open in silent bliss, hands pressed to bodies in gestures that no saint should make. The aquila above the landing spire had been melted into a shape with too many wings. As we landed, the vox came alive with whispers. Not words, not even sound, a texture, a pulse, like breath brushing your eardrum. I shut off the channel, but the pulse continued inside my skull. When the ramp opened, the air hit me like perfume and rot. I saw the people waiting, hundreds, perhaps thousands, lined along the causeway to the basilica. They wore robes that shimmered like fresh wounds. They smiled when they saw me. Their teeth gleamed like pearls. I spoke the Emperor's benediction, my voice trembling. They answered in unison, a chorus of devotion that almost sounded holy. But their rhythm was too perfect, their eyes too wide. One woman reached toward me and traced the aquila across her chest, except her fingers didn't stop at her heart. She kept going, down her ribs, across her stomach, her smile trembling with tears. "We are free," she whispered. Inside the basilica, the walls moved, not visibly, but in sensation, as though the building itself inhaled. Incense coiled upward in plumes the color of bruises. The choir pit was filled, but their song had no melody. It was a single note, drawn out too long, held until the air itself seemed to crack. I felt my throat tightening, a desperate need to either scream or weep. The priest of this place, or what they called a priest, approached me. His vestments were gold and purple, his skin marked with faint sigils that pulsed under the light. "Welcome, missionary," he said, his voice a velvet hum. "You've come for the feast." I asked what feast he meant. He smiled, and the skin at the corner of his mouth split open, a small line of blood trickling down his chin. "The feast of silence," he said, "when all voices surrender and the Emperor listens to the pleasure of his children." That night, the bells tolled across Virelia, and the city fell quiet. I sat in the guest cell, unable to pray. From somewhere beyond the cathedral, I heard something begin, not screams, not laughter, but something between the two. A sound that grew until it seemed to fill the bones of the world. I covered my ears, but it didn't stop. The feast of silence had begun. The sound didn't end with the night. It pulsed through the dawn like a second heartbeat. When I stepped outside my cell, the air was thick with incense so sweet it clawed the back of my throat. The streets glistened as though they'd been polished. Faint streaks of red led away from the cathedral steps, vanishing into the alleys. No guards patrolled, no banners of the aquila hung in the wind. Only ribbons of silk fluttered pink, gold, violety stained at the edges as if soaked in blood. I followed the path toward the square. The morning light filtered through smoke and color, painting the crowd in soft halos. Children danced around their parents, and the parents laughed in voices that cracked on the edge of sobs. Musicians played strange instrument strings made from something that looked like human hair, drums that throbbed like skin still warm. Every note quivered, almost sensual, and beneath it I heard the hum again. It wasn't in the air. It was under it, a deeper vibration that seemed to thrum from the bones of the world. Itself, at the square's center, stood an altar carved from marble that seemed to breathe. The priest, no, the thing that led them, raised his arms. His vestments shimmered as though wet. "Brothers and sisters," he called, "the Emperor is love, and love is freedom. Let us offer our voices to his divine silence." The crowd answered with a cry that was both worship and hunger. They pressed close together, touching, shuddering, weeping, moaning. I tried to retreat, but hands reached for me, soft and insistent. Someone whispered, "You will understand. You will see him through us." I tore free, stumbling toward the steps of the basilica. The stone underfoot was slick. My boot soles left smears when I ran. Inside, the choir sang again. The note had changed. No longer one pitch, but many, layered and writhing, clashing in ways that made my vision blur. The air vibrated with it. My teeth ached. I saw the icons on the walls ripple. The Emperor's face elongated, the halo around his head twisting into a spiral. My faith told me to look away, to close my eyes and pray, but I couldn't. Behind me, the doors closed with a sound like a sigh. The priest stood beside the altar, his eyes burning violet in the candlelight. "Do you feel it?" he asked softly. "This is what the Imperium denies. This is truth unbound by law, by shame." He lifted a chalice. Inside it shimmered something alive, a fluid that pulsed like a beating heart. "Drink and be freed of silence." I refused. My voice cracked when I said the Emperor's name, and that made him smile. "You already doubt," he said. "He does not hear you here." He tipped the chalice, and the liquid spilled onto the altar. It hissed, smoking, and the scent that rose from it was unbearable perfume and rot, sweet enough to make my head swim. Then the walls began to breathe in earnest. The frescoes moved, figures writhing within the paint, eyes opening where none had been. I stumbled back, my hands shaking, the hum rising to a shriek inside my skull. Outside, the people's cries reached a crescendo of ecstasy, and for the first time since I'd left Terra, I understood why saints sometimes gouged out their eyes rather than look upon heresy. When I closed mine, I saw her. At first, I thought it was a vision-some warp-born mirage conjured by exhaustion and incense. But she was there, behind my eyelids, watching. Her shape shimmered between beauty and monstrosity, each breath shifting her form. Flesh turned to silk, silk to light, light to bone. Her voice was a whisper and a moan, curling inside my skull like smoke. "Do not fear," she said. "You came to speak of love, and love is all I am." I opened my eyes, gasping. The basilica was gone. The marble, the incense, the choral, replaced by a void of color and sound that pulsed like the inside of a living creature. The priest stood beside me, but now his robes were gone, and his skin gleamed like polished glass, veins pulsing with light. "You see her," he breathed, smiling as if in worship. "She has chosen you." I stumbled backward, but there was no floor, only an expanse of trembling flesh beneath the translucent film. Shapes moved inside it, human and not, faces pressing outward, mouths open in silent song before sinking again. The hum had become a melody now, a symphony of pleasure and despair. Every note twisted my thoughts, pulling at the threads of memory until I could no longer recall what prayer had once felt like. "Please," I whispered. "I served the Emperor." The priest tilted his head, pity softening his expression. "You serve him," he said. "You serve the same God. Yours hides behind silence. Ours sings in every heartbeat. The Emperor denies what she embraces it." He touched my cheek, and pain bloomed through my body like light. My skin rippled, vision fracturing into prisms. For an instant, I saw what he saw, a universe of color, of endless sensation, where pain and joy intertwined until they were indistinguishable. My body trembled, half in horror, half in something I couldn't name. When I tore free, strips of light clung to my hands like liquid glass. I ran through corridors that pulsed and whispered, through air so thick it felt like touch. Faces emerged from the walls, eyes gleaming, lips forming words I couldn't hear. At the cathedral doors, I found the street again, but it wasn't a city anymore. The towers had melted into spires of gold and flesh, windows blinking like eyes. The people danced in spirals, laughing, crying, embracing each other with wild devotion. In the center of it all stood a colossal figure of impossible grace, her reflection, rising from the warp itself, wings unfolding into infinity. The priest's voice echoed through the square. "Sing, my children. Let the Emperor hear the truth of his forgotten self." The crowd screamed as one, their voices merging into the melody that had consumed my mind. I fell to my knees, hands pressed to my ears, but the sound wasn't outside, was inside me. Every beat of my heart was part of that song. I looked up once more. Her eyes found mine through the fire and the light, and for an instant, I felt what they felt. Ecstasy so profound it devoured thought. Love so vast it became agony. Then the world broke. The sky tore open in violet flame. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was the Aquila above the spire melting, its two heads twisting into one eternal scream. When I awoke, I thought I had been buried alive. The air was hot and wet, the darkness trembling like the inside of a throat. I could hear breathing dozens of lungs exhaling in perfect rhythm. Then a light flared, soft and pink, revealing walls that pulsed like muscle. I was inside the cathedral, but it no longer looked like any structure of man. Veins traced the arches, blood moved through them in slow waves, and every column quivered as though restraining some living hunger beneath. I tried to move. My wrists were bound by cords that weren't rope. They flexed, tightening when I pulled. Flesh responded to my touch. It felt me. I gagged and called out, but the sound died in the air. Even my voice trembled as though afraid to exist here. Shapes approached from the far side of the hall. They were once human. I could see remnants of humanity beneath the shifting skin, but now their forms glimmered as though seen through water. Faces merged and separated, limbs stretched and recoiled, and everywhere their skin glowed faintly from within. One of them leaned close, their features rippling into what might have been pity. "You resisted the gift," they whispered, their voice a harmony of two. "You still cling to his silence." The priest stepped forward. His robes were gone, replaced by flesh that shimmered with oil and gold dust. His eyes were pools of violet flame. "You saw her," he said gently. "That means you are blessed. The silence broke for you. Few survive that moment." Fewer still understand it. He knelt beside me, stroking the cords that held my arms, and the walls seemed to pulse in time with his breath. I spat a prayer through my teeth, a desperate fragment of the litanies of faith. The priest smiled. He cannot hear you here. This place is no longer his. He gestured toward the altar, and the floor itself rose, reshaping into a platform of bone and marble veins. Upon it lay bodies, some still moving, some already still. Their skin was covered in patterns like calligraphy carved into living flesh. The designs pulsed softly, glowing when the choir began to sing again. The sound was unbearable. It wasn't loud, but it was perfect. Every note slid beneath the next like skin over muscle, smooth and inevitable. It invaded thought, replaced language. I could feel the shape of each tone inside my head, as if it was being written on my brain. The priest lifted his arms. "This is the choir of flesh," he said, and the walls echoed his words. They sing through their pain. Each voice is tuned to the frequency of devotion. Every wound opens the door wider. One of the singers collapsed mid-phrase, her body twitching, but the others didn't stop. Their song changed key, absorbing her death like another chord. I screamed for them to stop, and for a moment I thought they didn't, till I realized the sound had only moved. It was in me now, vibrating through my bones, reshaping my heartbeat into their rhythm. The priest touched my forehead, marking me with blood drawn from his palm. "You will join them soon," he said softly. "Your voice will be beautiful." And as the hymn rose again, I felt the cords around my arms begin to tighten, not to strangle, but to teach my body the rhythm of their music. The song seeped into me like poison and prayer intertwined. I could feel each vibration crawl along my veins, syncing my heartbeat to the rhythm of their impossible harmony. The walls swelled with each note, exhaling heat. The scent of copper and incense was so thick it felt alive, as though the air itself was drinking from me. Every time I tried to breathe, something unseen pressed closer, whispering that resistance was vanity. The cords around my wrists loosened just enough for me to move under that. Somehow was worse. The priest watched with a strange tenderness, like a parent encouraging a child to speak. "Let the sound take you," he murmured. "The Emperor would have you kneel and whisper. She wants you to sing." His words were velvet wrapped around knives. I felt their edges slide through my will. One of the singers staggered toward me. Her face was serene, but her eyes rolled back, white and shining. Her lips trembled with a tune I could not name, and when her hand touched mine, sensation exploded through my body. Pleasure, pain, sorrow, each note bloomed into color behind my eyes. For a moment, I wasn't myself. I saw through her, saw what she saw. Endless corridors of flesh, voices suspended in ecstasy, and in the distance, a figure vast enough to eclipse meaning. Her touch lingered even when she fell, her body unraveling into smoke that smelled of wine and blood. The choir absorbed her absence seamlessly, never missing a beat. The priest smiled. "Perfection," he whispered. "To die in song is to live forever within it." I tore my arms free, skin burning where the cords had fused. I ran, not knowing where, only that I had to move. Before I was nothing but another harmony in their symphony. Corridors twisted in impossible geometry. Steps led both up and down. I saw windows that looked not upon the city, but into a sky that bled color like a wound. From one archway I glimpsed the outside, the streets alive with dancers and cries of devotion. Fire and joy mixed together, inseparable. A group of acolytes passed me, carrying a body toward the altar. They didn't see me. Their eyes were fixed on whatever lived within their minds. Their lips moved in silent repetition. Beauty is truth, pain is worship, silence is sin. I pressed against the wall, the texture slick and warm beneath my palms, and waited until they were gone. Somewhere deeper within the cathedral, machinery hummed a wet mechanical rhythm like a heartbeat forced through gears. I followed the sound until I reached a massive door of iron and sinew. Its surface trembled with each pulse of the choir. When I touched it, it opened on its own, parting like lips. Inside was the source of the music. Hundreds of bodies were suspended from hooks, their throats threaded with silver cords that glowed faintly. Tubes fed into their veins, drawing fluids that shimmered like molten color into vast glass tanks along the walls. Every movement they made, every tremor, produced sound. They were instruments, sculpted into perpetual praise. The priest's voice carried from behind me, gentle, proud. They are the foundation of the new hymn. Once they were priests, soldiers, pilgrims. Now they are eternal. Shall I show you what your note will sound like? I turned toward him, my voice raw, trembling. You'll have to kill me first. He smiled, stepping closer through the red light. Oh no, he said. That's how the music begins. He moved closer until the heat from his skin seared the air between us. The cords that bound the singers thrummed, their silver lines drawing arcs of light through the gloom. Each body swayed in time to the hymn, their mouths open in perfect O shapes, sound pouring out like steam from broken pipes. The smell was unbearable iron and perfume and sweat. My pulse pounded in the same rhythm as theirs. He took my hand and guided it toward the nearest figure. The flesh there was soft, slick, and trembling beneath my touch. Do you hear her in them? He asked. Every breath, every shudder, a note of her perfection. Join them and you will never be silent again. His words slid across me like oil. Somewhere deep inside, the missionary eye had been screamed against it. But that voice was distant, smothered under the tide of sensation. The singer's eyes opened. They were not eyes anymore, only voids of violet light. Her lips moved, shaping my name. I recoiled, but her arms stretched impossibly far, wrapping around me. The cords binding her throat pulled tight, and the sound that escaped her was a harmony of pleasure and agony so pure it stripped thought away. The note tore through me, filled my chest, and I sang back not willingly, but because the sound demanded it. My scream became part of the hymn. The priest laughed, spreading his arms as though to embrace the world. Yes, you see, the emperor's silence was the true heresy. His laughter merged with the music, rising higher until the ceiling itself split along its seams. Light cascaded down, shards of brilliance that cut like glass. The suspended bodies writhed, their forms melting into one another, merging into a single mass that pulsed and sang. The air thickened, every breath tasting of copper and wine. Something broke above us. The cathedral shuddered as if the sky itself had joined the song. Through the fissures in the ceiling, I saw the stars twist into spirals of impossible color. The warp was closer than I had ever felt. I wrenched myself free from the grasping limbs, stumbling toward the corridor. My boots slipped on the slick floor. Each footprint left a smear of red that glowed faintly before fading. Behind me, the priest's voice chased me down the hall, still tender, still intimate. Run if you must, missionary. but you will carry her melody wherever you flee. She is inside you now. I burst through a doorway into what had once been a refectory. The tables were gone, replaced by cages fashioned from twisted bones. Inside them, shapes shifted, murmuring fragments of prayers long forgotten. One turned its face toward me, and I realized it wore a mask of its own skin, stitched closed at the eyes. "End it," it whispered, but its mouth didn't move. The voice echoed directly inside my head. "End it before the song reaches the stars." For a heartbeat, I almost obeyed. My hand found the small blade still at my belt, the symbol of my mission carved into its hilt. But when I looked at the steel, it pulsed with faint violet veins, as though even it now sang to her tune. I dropped it and fled. Behind me, the hymn reached its peak. The sound was no longer music, it was revelation. The walls quaked, flesh and stone melding, and through that final crescendo, I heard her voice again, soft and close to my ear. "You are mine, beloved," she whispered. "Sing for me when the silence ends." The world answered with a scream that shook the heavens. When I emerged from the cathedral, the sky had changed again. The violet storm that once bled across the horizon now burned with ribbons of gold and pink, shimmering as if the heavens themselves were aflame. The city below had transformed beyond recognition. What had once been streets of devotion now writhed with color and motion, the architecture melting into curves and flesh-like towers that pulsed with each wave of sound coming from the cathedral behind me. The air was alive, vibrating with whispers and laughter that no longer belonged to mortals. I staggered into the open square, blinded by light. The ground beneath my boots was warm living in. Every step left a faint impression that closed itself like lips. People surrounded me, though people felt like a mercy of a word. Their forms shimmered, shedding and reforming shapes like mirages. Some wore the faces of angels, others the twisted visages of beasts. And yet they all smiled the same smile, the one I'd seen on the priest, the one that knew pleasure and pain as one breath. The carnival had begun. They called it the Festival of Deliverance, though no voice spoke those words aloud. The meaning simply bled into my mind, as if the warp itself had decided I needed to understand. Every sound was music, every motion a dance, every face another instrument in their symphony of blasphemy. Dancers spun in spirals of blood, their limbs slick with gold dust. Flutes carved from bone howled from balconies. Drums of stretched skin beat to the rhythm of heartbeats that were not my own. A man passed me wearing robes of pink flame. His eyes were gone, replaced by swirling orbs of color that moved independently, seeking, searching. He grinned when he saw me. "The missionary lives," he said, his voice echoing inside my skull, though his lips never moved. "You will see the prophet tonight. She rises from our devotion." I ran, or thought I did, though my body moved as if through honey. Everywhere I turned, the city offered a new face of horror disguised as beauty. Lovers melted into each other, limbs twisting into impossible knots of ecstasy. Children painted symbols on the walls with blood that shimmered like liquid pearl. From the tallest spire, something massive and radiant began to take shape, a figure woven of light and shadow, neither solid nor illusion. Her wings stretched across the skyline, each feather a shard of glass reflecting the screams below. The priest's voice rose over the madness, amplified by the warp itself. "Rejoice, children of sensation. The Emperor's silence ends tonight. Our goddess awakens, and through our bliss, we make her flesh anew. The crowd roared, their voices merging into a wave of sound that hit me like a physical blow. The vibration shook my bones. My teeth rattled inside my skull. I fell to my knees, clutching my ears, but the noise came from everywhere inside me, around me, within the very air. The ground cracked, and streams of molten color flowed outward, crawling up the walls and across the bodies of the faithful. They danced as they burned. I crawled beneath a fallen archway, desperate for shadow, but even there the light found me. Every beat of my heart matched the rhythm of their worship. The warp was here not just a whisper, but a presence, a storm that devoured the line between matter and thought. Somewhere above the chaos, the colossal figure's eyes opened, vast and merciless. The sky bled violet. The laughter of a god rolled through the city like thunder, and I felt my sanity begin to fracture under its weight. Her gaze fell upon me, and for one brief, infinite second, I understood the truth. We were never meant to be saved. The sky over Virelia no longer belonged to real space. It churned like liquid silk, its colors shifting with every heartbeat of the planet. The laughter of the crowd became the rhythm of this new world, their movements choreographed by the will of something vast. I could feel it beneath my feet, through the marrow of the ground, a pulse that answered to her name even when no mouth dared speak it. I pressed against the wall of a collapsed hablock, its surface slick and warm. The bricks bled faintly when I leaned my weight on them. Across the square, dancers turned in spirals, ribbons of light trailing from their fingers. They were not celebrating life. They were celebrating surrender. Each motion, each cry, fed the being that gazed down from the sky. The priest stood at the center of it all, his form now radiant and monstrous. He wore no flesh as mortals do. His body shimmered with translucent brilliance, and his eyes burned like twin suns. When he raised his hands, the dancers froze. The silence that followed was worse than their song. It was heavy, intimate, the quiet that comes before a scream. Then he spoke, and his voice rippled through the air like music pressed through blood. Behold our devotion made perfect. Through ecstasy we build her throne. He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping across the crowd, and when it found me, the weight of it nearly broke my knees. Missionary, he said, you have witnessed the birth of divinity. Why do you hide from paradise? I tried to answer, but my throat closed. The words of the creed would not form. Instead, what slipped out was a whisper, soft and trembling. Mercy, he laughed, a sound too beautiful to belong to any sane creature. Mercy is a lie. There is only hunger, and she is mercy for those who accept it. The ground split open beneath the prophet's feet. From it rose a column of light filled with shapes, faces, limbs, entire souls entwined. They sang as they ascended, their voices indistinguishable from the storm's roar. The prophet spread his arms, and the column poured through him, into him, until his body became pure radiance. The crowd fell to their knees, screaming praises that blistered the air. I turned away, but even my shadow betrayed me, stretching toward the light as if begging to be taken. The air burned with sweetness. Every breath tasted of pleasure sharpened to a blade. I stumbled toward the outskirts, where the city met the dunes, but the horizon melted like wax. There was nowhere left to run. The world itself bent inward, drawn toward the colossal figure descending from the heavens. She was beauty made terror. Her wings unfolded across the sky, feathers of living flame, her laughter echoing through the warp and the hearts of those who worshipped. Every note of her voice peeled away the pretense of flesh, leaving only the raw essence of sensation. I saw people burst apart in joy, their bodies dissolving into motes of light that drifted upward like sparks. Somewhere in the chaos, I felt my faith stir, a tiny ember suffocating under the storm. I fell to my knees and tried to pray, but the words drowned beneath her laughter. When I looked up again, the sky had no sun, only her face smiling through the ruin, and still the people danced. The dance spread like infection. It consumed streets, sanctuaries, manufacturums everywhere. The faithful once prayed, they now swayed in delirium. From the rooftops, flayed banners fluttered like tongues, each one whispering hymns that could drive men to madness. The warp hung low over the city, its clouds pulsing to the rhythm of the worship below. I could see the shape of her wings now, vast enough to eclipse the light of the sun. They cast shadows that pulsed, alive and trembling, over every street and spire. I forced my way through the crowd, shoulder to shoulder with the lost. Faces turned toward me, painted with blood and gold. A man whose eyes had melted into luminous tears grabbed my arm, laughing. "You'll see her soon," he said, voice soft and broken. "She's already inside you. She's in everyone now." His breath smelled of honey and iron. I pushed him away and stumbled through the press of bodies, every heartbeat sinking with the pulsing glow above. The closer I came to the central spire, the stronger the hum grew. It wasn't sound anymore, it was thought made manifest, pressing against my skull until my own memories blurred. I tried to recall the Emperor's visage, the golden halo, the words of the creed, but they slipped from me like sand. Only her song remained. At the base of the spire stood the choir of flesh, or what was left of them. They had merged together, their bodies fused in reverence, creating a single colossal being that wrapped around the structure like a serpent made of human devotion. Their mouths opened and closed in rhythm, producing a sound that was both music and prayer. The spire itself pulsed with each note, its surface shifting between metal and meat, as though the city itself had been converted into an organ of worship. I saw the priest again. Or perhaps he was no longer a priest at all. His body was entirely translucent, every vein glowing with divine corruption. He looked upon me with a smile that could have been pity or hunger. "It is done," he said. "She rises through us. Can you feel her love?" The ground shook violently. Cracks tore through the plaza, and from them rose streams of molten light. The crowd screamed, not in fear, but joy. They threw themselves into the fissures willingly, burning to ash that glowed like starlight. The prophet extended his arms toward the heavens. "Our sacrifice is the hymn, our flesh, the bridge." The sky split open. The warp poured through like liquid glass, raining color that burned and healed in the same instant. I felt something touch my mind, a caress made of warmth and cruelty. Her voice echoed across the planet, sweet as silk. "My beloved children, you have shown me your hearts. Now let me show you mine." And then it began to rain bodies. Angels of pleasure, creatures of impossible symmetry and monstrous beauty descended upon the crowd. They embraced the faithful, tearing and caressing, consuming and rebirthing in waves of radiant horror. Every scream added to the melody. Every death birthed a new note in the eternal song. I fell to the ground, clutching my head, my vision dissolving into light and shadow. The last thing I saw before blackness took me was the prophet's form dissolving into pure energy, his laughter blending with the cries of his followers. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer sure if I was alive or already part of the hymn. I awoke beneath a sky that no longer knew stars. It pulsed in rhythm, a living canopy of color that breathed and whispered. The ground beneath me throbbed with the same pulse, as though the planet itself was nothing more than the slow, shuddering heartbeat of the goddess now enthroned within it. The air was thick, warm, perfumed with decay. When I inhaled, I tasted sweetness and ash together, like the final exhalation of a dying saint. I was lying among the ruins of what had been the basilica. The great spire was gone, no rubble, no wreckage, just absence, as if it had been erased from the world entirely. Around me, fragments of humanity crawled through the mist. Some still had faces, though the eyes were hollow. Others had become shapes without name, creatures of devotion, each one murmuring fragments of hymns, their voices rising and falling in uneven harmony. I tried to stand. My legs trembled, weak and alien, as if the flesh remembered the music even when I did not. Every nerve burned with faint pleasure when I moved. I hated it. I hated how part of me wanted to stay still, to listen, to let the hum swallow me whole. There were lights on the horizon. Ships, I knew the glow, the harsh, cold gleam of Imperial fire. The Inquisition had come, too late as always. The vox in my ear crackled, half buried under static. If anyone still lives, signal. Emperor's mercy. I laughed then, a sound too broken to be human. There was no mercy left here, only echoes of what once prayed for it. I began to walk, limping through the wreckage of Virelia's capital. The streets were glass now, smooth and black, reflecting the colors above like a mirror to hell. Bodies lay fused into the surface, faces preserved midst. A child's hand reached upward from the glass, frozen in place, the skin glistening like crystal. I knelt beside it, whispering the last benediction I remembered. The Emperor protects. My voice cracked halfway through, and I wasn't sure if I believed it anymore. A figure emerged from the hazer woman, or what remained of one. She was naked, her skin painted in runes that shifted as she moved. Where her eyes should have been, light poured outward in thin, trembling beams. "You still speak his name," she said softly. Her voice was beautiful, melodic, almost gentle. "Why cling to silence when you've heard the song?" I raised the broken Aquila pendant that still hung around my neck. It burned faintly in my hand, reacting to her presence. "Because it's all I have left," I said. She smiled, and her expression was almost kind. "Then you have nothing." Her body began to unravel into threads of light, dissolving into the air like mist. As she vanished, her laughter lingered sweet and haunting. The sky began to weep. Not rain, not ashlight. Droplets of luminescence fell from the heavens, sizzling when they touched the ground. Each one carried a faint whisper, a promise, a memory. And somewhere within that rain, I could still hear her voice. "You are mine, missionary. Even in death, you will sing." I fell to my knees again, clutching the pendant, whispering prayers that no longer had meaning. Above me, the warships began their bombardment. Lances of fire descended from orbit, burning the horizon clean. But as the world began to die, the wind carried one last echo through the air, soft, melodic, endless dot, the hymn of Slaanesh. The bombardment began as a whisper, a vibration that trembled through the black glass streets. Each impact was distant thunder, softened by the fog that clung to the dying city. Then the light came surgical, absolute. Orbital fire lanced through the clouds, cutting ribbons of daylight through the endless twilight. For an instant, the streets gleamed again, and I saw the truth of what remained. The people of Virelia, what was left of them, did not flee. They lifted their faces to the sky as the bombardment fell, singing. The hymn that had once risen from the basilica now poured from every throat, a final act of devotion. They burned beautifully. Their bodies dissolved into fire, and the air itself sang as it consumed them. Even the flames seemed alive, twisting in ecstasy as they devoured flesh and stone alike. I stumbled through the ruin, shielding my eyes from the glare. Each explosion painted the world in color: pink, violet, white, then black. The air was too hot to breathe. Somewhere above, Imperial voices echoed through the Voxnet orders, coordinates, the cold language of annihilation. They thought they were purging heresy. They didn't understand. You can't cleanse what has become a song. At the city's edge, where the dunes began, I saw the horizon break. A shape towered there, vast and luminous, her outline fracturing with each bombardment. The goddess was fading, her form unraveling under the fury of the fleet, yet she smiled. Her laughter rippled through the clouds, blending with the thunder of the cannons. Every death below seemed to feed her one last note of pleasure. I fell to my knees in the sand, gripping the Aquila pendant until it cut into my palm. My blood hissed when it touched the glass beneath me. I tried to pray again, but the words refused to come. Instead, I whispered to no one, "Forgive me." The vox crackled in my ear, clearer now. "Identify yourself. Any survivor, respond." I pressed the cum bead, my voice hoarse. "This is Missionary Lorian Kael. Virelia is lost. There is nothing left to save." Silence followed, broken only by the storm above. Then a voice answered, distant, metallic. "Acknowledged. Emperor's mercy, mercy." I almost laughed. I looked back at the city, a pit of glowing ruin. The hymn still lingered there, faint and eternal. I could hear it even over the bombardment, woven into the wind, into the rhythm of my own heart. The final bombardment fell. The light swallowed the horizon, and the world folded inward. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then came the silence, total and suffocating. The song ended, and in its wake I heard only the whisper of the sea returning to glass. When I awoke again, I was aboard an Imperial vessel. The Medicae said they found me wandering the dunes. Eyes burned, hands scarred, muttering fragments of a hymnal one recognized. They think I am mad. Perhaps they are right. But at night, when the ship sleeps, I hear it again through the hum of the engines, a faint melody, distant yet growing closer. They say Virelia was cleansed, reduced to ash and orbiting dust. They say the Emperor's light triumphed. But I know better. There are still notes vibrating in the void, and somewhere in the warp, she listens. The feast of silence was never meant to end.